Hey y'all, so I've been watching Person of Interest, which is a TV show from like 2012, written by Jonathan Nolan, who's the brother of Christopher Nolan and who like co-writes a lot of his movies and stuff. So I was like, oh, my wife wants to watch something. Let's check this out. This sounds good. So Person of Interest, we just finished the first season, so I figured I'd talk about it season by season. So, because it's kind of like the Monster of the Week situation where there's like a overarching story and things change and there's like some overarching plot, but generally every episode's just like, oh, here's a person we gotta rescue or something, and then they do it, and then in the next episode. So the main cast is John Reese. He's like an ex-Special Forces, Green Beret, ex-CIA. He's like the man, he's like the physical man, like he's the one who tracks. Oh, so the gist of it is, I should start with that. There's a machine created by this guy that monitors everything, right? And it was built initially to like stop terrorism in America, but it does surveillance and analysis and everything. So what it also does is it figures out people who are doing like premeditated murder, or if it finds people, and they're called like incidentals or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they call them. Because they stopped talking about it like after like the first or second episode, and there's like 23 episodes. But the creator of the machine, who goes by, oh shoot, that is terrible. What is his name? Finch. He goes by Finch, something Finch. I can't remember. He decides that he wants to help these people, so he does the best that he can. And so he kind of essentially hires John to tag along with him and save these people. And that's the thing. So it spits out social security numbers, because the machine at this point is like a closed box. So you can't really interact with it too much, but it'll like spit out social security numbers. So then with those social security numbers, Finch, who is like a master hacker / master computer guy / anything technology or whatever, he is like in robotics or surveillance or any of that stuff. Not surveillance, like in-person surveillance, like spying on people. He is like an extreme expert at, and that's like his deal. He's also like a gimpy boy. He's got like a jacked up leg. We don't find out how that happened. The show periodically goes back in time a few years to like him and his like homie who was like his beard, he's the one who's like running the company and is like actually the guy with the machine, and Finch is just pretending to be like the IT guy who's just helping out so that he can kind of stay off the grid. Anyway, that guy dies. We don't really know how or why. And then there's some other lady involved who she's like freaking out, and she shows up periodically. We don't get a lot of answers. We do get that the machine like periodically like calls Finch like on a payphone, because John at some point starts tailing him and finds that out. And then at the very end, spoiler, Finch gets like kidnapped by this other hacker lady, who's a total babe, by the way. And John like goes up to like a camera and is like, hey, you need to help me get Finch back, or we're both going to be at a loss. And then the machine like calls him on the payphone. So that was fun. That was kind of, you don't realize that's happening till near the end. So it's a super big reveal that like this machine is like actively engaging and not just like sending emails, or like Finch isn't logging into anything. Like he's talking to the machine, and the machine's like, here you go, bro. Finch also, we learned that he had like a whole life. He had like a fiance, who's that pretty redhead lady who was like famous for being a nerd. I think that's her. It's somebody I recognize who's got red hair. Anyway, so that's fun. And then it's like I said, his friend died, and then like everything else that occurred. So I'm gonna pause this because I'm here. All right, I'm paused. So where are we at, John? Oh, okay, yeah. So that's like Finch. Finch is very mysterious. We don't know if he uses his real name. At some point, somebody does like a background check on him, and they find like nothing. Like essentially that he didn't exist until like a few years ago, and then and there's like no information, and like the name clearly, like, the name Finch, and I can't remember what his first name is. It starts with an H, I think. Anyway, that's like fake. So that's Finch. He's a very mysterious character, and we learned that he had this fiance, and that's about it. And he was super close friends with this guy, and then he still looks after his like quote unquote nephew, who's like his best friend who died. His kid, the guy who was doing the beard thing. Okay, so then John, like I said, he had this lover, and then he like essentially they broke up because he kept going to war, like 2001, kind of like 9/11 stuff. And then he joined the CIA, and then they bump into each other at an airport, and we find out that he's been kind of like stalking her, and that she got engaged and then married, and they run into each other when she's engaged, right when she get engaged, and she essentially says like, "Hey, you tell me to break up with this guy and come with you, I will do it." And he's like, "No, it's better that you stay away from me." Like he's being very self-sacrificed, which eventually leads her to getting abused by this husband and then killed. And then John like takes care of that problem. We don't see exactly what happens, but it's implied that he kills him. But at the same time, like this guy's body never shows up. And then at some point, there's like a similar situation, and that guy ends up in like a prison in Mexico forever, caught with like child pornography or something. Clearly, John like set that up, right? Put this guy away forever, like this wife abuser who was like a U.S. Marshal. Anyway, so and then we got Fosco, who's a corrupt cop that John like turns into an asset, and he ends up being like a really good guy because he wants to be good, and he doesn't want to be a corrupt cop. He's got like a son that comes up a little bit, but he's a funny guy. He's not like a comedic figure, but he's like a kind of like a fat policeman who's a little corrupt, and he's like John's kind of got him by the balls, and so he has to do stuff for him, but he also likes helping people. And then his partner is this Carter lady who is like an ex 35 Mike is what we call it. It's like an in-person interrogator, like intelligence. It's like a human intel analyst. And now she's like a homicide detective. And she at first is searching for John because he's like involved with all these crimes. And eventually she also becomes an asset. But then they keep her and Fosco in the dark about each other. And then finally in like the last episode, they realize that like they're both working for John and Finch, which is kind of fun. But she's cool, pretty lady, and then kind of like those are like the main four characters, and then the secondary character, there's a secondary character. She shows up like 3 or 4 times. She's like she's one of the people on the list, and then they like elicit her help later on for like other things. She's like a fixer. That's what she is. So she gets hired by politicians or whoever to like blackmail people to like get stuff off the news or to dig stuff up about this or that, right? That's like her gig. And so she's fun whenever she shows up. Like again, she's like one of the characters they're trying to protect. And then after that, they like become besties, and her and John have like some back and forth. That's kind of fun. All right. So that's the gist of the show. So every show they get like a number or 2, and then they go to like take care of that, and then the person's either the other secondary character is like the main antagonist for like the first. It's like the second act. So the first act is just kind of like random stuff, and then we meet this guy. What is his name? His name is Elias, and Elias is like the king of the underworld. He's like the bastard son of like a mafia don in New York City, and he eventually almost takes over the whole shebang. There's also this group called HR, which is like the corrupt police that Fosco kind of used to work for, and then he goes undercover to like bust. So we get a lot of interaction with some of the HR guys in the third act mostly. In the second act, it's mostly Elias versus John, and Elias has this whole criminal underground. He's got a guy who works for the police, and there's this whole thing. And eventually, near the end of the like second act of the first season, he gets caught and thrown in jail, but he also gets like revenge on like his dad and his like half brother by killing them, which is kind of like one of his main goals. And he's like, he's like a king of the underworld. So he's like in jail, but it's like whatever. John and Finch also get HR to like turn against him because they were working with him. And then in the third act, HR and the FBI kind of become the main bad guys. Oh yeah, the CIA is around in like the second act too, is kind of like antagonists trying to kill John. And we find out that they tried to kill him and his partner when they were in, I don't know if I can get around this thing. When they were in China at some point working for the CIA, and that didn't work out too well because both of them escaped alive, even though his partner shot John. And then she shows up and kills like the guys from the CIA who are investigating John, and then we don't see her again. That all happens in like one episode. We get a lot of flashbacks to him working with this lady. She's like a no-nonsense CIA, so maybe she'll show up in the second season. That's why I didn't really talk about her. Like she's kind of the people in the past. The main one is the girlfriend. I guess this other lady too shows up periodically in his past, and then comes in the present and kills him. And then the final boss, who is clearly set up to be the antagonist of the second season, is this hacker lady. She's in like one episode. Her and Finch go at it, and they have like some back and forth. And then she essentially sets up like a trap where she realizes the machine exists, and she like sets up a situation where she's going to get murdered and pretends to be like a psychologist, so that John rescues her and gets her to Finch, and then she kidnaps Finch, and that's how like the first season ends. So that she's clearly going to be involved in the second season. So I don't know who's going to come back or not. Like the Elias thing might just be done. I don't know. There's like 5 seasons, so it's not gonna happen. A lot of stuff. The first season is very good. It's kind of got, sometimes it's just kind of like, oh, we're just like rescuing people, or like, oh, we're trying to rescue somebody, but realize they're the one who's gonna kill somebody else, right? And there's the episodes are each like Monster of the Week episode essentially part is like written well. The more interesting part is the overarching thing that's going on, and it's a Nolan thing, right? It's a John Nolan thing. So you know it's gonna get weird, and it kind of already is. Like the machine's clearly more sentient than like we initially. At the beginning of the season, you're just kind of like, oh, it's a machine that's pumping out numbers. But by the end, you're like, no, it is a sentient machine. Like it understands like stuff that's going on, and it's somewhat like. And then there's like a whole thing with like this hacker lady's trying to get access to it clearly because there's another lady who was involved. Like she worked for the government and she was part of the buy and set up the machine for the government to track terrorism. She's like super paranoid, and she shows up and she's trying to warn John or Finch. As she tracks Finch down, eventually he's like, "You're lucky I'm here and not those other people." And he's like, "What other people?" And then she gets shot by the lady who's pretending to be the psychologist, who is the hacker lady. And the fixer lady also tracks down this information around the same time. So it's like she's like calls John and she's like, "It's a setup." It's very good. That final episode is very intense and very good. But yeah, Fosco is able to like get HR like all taken care of and thrown in jail, and he like reveals the mole that was in the FBI, and the FBI is trying to track John just because he's involved with a lot of like criminal activities, essentially like all this stuff he's doing. Like it's never above the board. And the CIA again, like they're around, but then they drop off in like kind of the final act, and the FBI kind of takes their place as like the government body that's searching for him. They seem right though. The FBI seems more honest. The CIA seems super corrupt as they are in real life. So the FBI is more mystical because the FBI in real life is also super corrupt. But Carter's also got a son, and there's an episode about that. But yeah, so I very much enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to season 2 to see where they're going to take it, because it seems like it might just kind of go totally off. They might fix everything in like the first season, or in the first couple episodes, and go back to the normal Monster of the Week. We'll see. It'll be interesting. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and if any of that sounds cool to you, I'd say check it out. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that show with that blonde chick and that black guy, where it was like time travel, and there's like the old man and the son, and the old man's crazy. But they like, I don't know if it's time travel or like dimensional stuff, or it's pretty good. It gets like super crazy though, like in the 3rd season, but the first 2 seasons are pretty good. So if you enjoyed that, I can't remember what it's called. It starts with an F, I think. Anyway, but yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'm gonna keep watching and see where that takes us. All right, cool. Catch y'all later.